Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey, podcast listeners, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with one of the foremost experts on distraction, both in the workplace and our daily lives. Curt Steinhorst is the founder of FocusWise, a training and consulting organization dedicated to helping companies overcome distraction in the workplace. He is the author of the best-selling book, Can I Have Your Attention?, and is an extremely engaging keynote speaker. I enjoyed the conversation, and I hope you do too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSQL Distribution Software. InSQL prides themselves on their rapid response customer support team. They maintain a very low 1 customer support person per 20 user ratio. Now, I have a long history with this company. I met the lead developer several years ago when he attended my inventory management seminar. He didn't just attend, he absorbed the content. Every couple of years, I head up to their Michigan headquarters to talk about product enhancements and see what they're up to. I always come away impressed. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSQL Distribution Software at www.insql.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right, Curt. Well, hey, thank you so much for coming on Distribution Talk today.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
You know, one of the things I like to do in this podcast is really go back with the guest and ask, how did you get involved with, your study of distraction? But, really, why did you get involved and frankly, get involved with teaching, coaching, and speaking as well?
Yeah, it's certainly not something that's on the list of options that a counselor gives you in college. So
yeah, definitely not.
In large part, it started as a personal journey. Professionally, I've always focused academically in undergrad and graduate studies on communication and how do we get people's attention? How do we keep their attention? And I was a debater in high school, and this has always just been a personal passion. But the other side of it is that I was diagnosed with ADD as a kid. And I was an odd case. I wasn't disruptive, and I didn't make bad grades. I did well, but I struggled to stay on task unless it hit certain parameters, and then I could focus really well. But it wasn't until I started my own business to really help people that had a large platform or organizations that had a lot of risk think of how are they going to approach their audiences and how are they going to communicate to their audience, how are they going to get their attention. The challenges of what were coming at me combined with the diagnosis that says I can't focus on anything resulted in me saying, we got to get to the root of this. And so it was fully my own personal, how do I make sure that I don't have to move back home with my parents?
Right. Yeah.
And then it just grew and grew and grew. And the layers and the questions that I was asking about what were the core issues, and not feeling like some of the self-help gurus were really offering sound advice. It seems like some of the challenges that people seem to find or think their solutions to distraction are more indicative of distraction than they are solutions to it. And then the last piece, speaking in that side, was never going to be something I was going to do. I was actually asked as a part of my work to contribute and to speak on trends that were shaping generational behavior. And so all of a sudden, a part of what I'm doing is speaking. And as the attention work on the consulting and coaching side grew, that ended up being all that I was doing on the speaking side as well.
Right. Absolutely. And, and I think I take a personal interest in this. I have a son who is diagnosed with ADHD. And, I recall when I first saw you speak and listening to this story, I was absolutely riveted and just fascinated by, the study that you've done and what you've done, looking at this really for more of a personal quest or personal journey to eventually, how do I share that with others and get them to, maybe take a look at this just a little bit differently.
Yeah, it's really easy in today's world for us to expose the reality of our challenges without offering real solutions or asking questions about why we can't seem to get on top of it. I never have to convince anyone that there's challenges around distraction, but it's when you take the next step and say, okay, so what would it look like to create focus? What are the possibilities? What's realistic? What do we do with these devices that on the one hand, we want to blame and say they're causing all these problems, but we all own them and know that we have incredible benefits in our usage of them.
Absolutely. I mean, these are, productivity tools, and I guess in the right hands or in the right frame of mind, that is really the intent behind it. But again, it distracts us so heavily. I mean, could you share some of the statistics, some of the things that, you studied? Really, how do some of these technology tools really pull us away from that ability to be productive?
There's several factors, and what we have to realize is that technology companies don't have the same interests we have, and not all of them, but a lot
Right.
of them. And secondly, a large percentage of them just aren't incorporating really the core challenge, which is that in a world of seemingly infinite computing power, what that exacerbates, the most limited resource we have is our attention. And so, in the vast majority of our productivity and performance and time management and efficiency and all of these models that we're using, there's a total failure to even understand what human attention is and what technology is doing to it. So, what I would say when I look at technology and how it's working is I take a more positive spin on it. We are wired for curiosity. The base system of attention in our brain is that we're wired to seek out and explore new things, uncover something that's interesting, focus on it until something else comes about. Like, right. So we're not really made to just zoom in and focus efficiently, perfectly all the time. We're made to explore. But what technology has done is it has moved us from a world where we explore what I would call incrementally, like
Right.
I'm in a space at a time and I'm taking a step forward, right, to having the infinite in our pockets. And that's where there's confusion because there's now always something else out there that we may need to explore. There's always something alluring. And our brain really wasn't wired to be able to resist that level of that opportunity for the potential of what else could be out there, right?
Right. I'm thinking back to a little article I read about this next generation coming in. And one of the attractive things about this next generation, we can call them Gen Z or however, just entering the workplace, is that they have an 8-second BS filter. In other words, they can get through things, this mass amount of information very, very quickly and get down to what they need. Whereas somebody of my generation has a very difficult time, at least maybe it's just my personal issue, but I have a very difficult time. I see all of these things and all of a sudden, oh, squirrel, and I'm off on something else. I have a very difficult time taking in this much information and being able to assimilate it.
Yeah, well, to encourage you, it's kind of up in the air whether the younger generation is actually capable or if it's a good thing or a bad thing. There's actually been some conflicting studies, some that would show that the more you are inundated at younger ages, the more you have coming at you. Yes, you're more used to filtering information through quick decisions and the right font and
Yes.
the words that elicit strong emotions, and unfortunately, even more the tendency to just take shortcuts, right? We take
Right.
shortcuts. And so I don't know that there's that benefit. I think what you're really saying is a combination of that you're experiencing what everyone is experiencing. We're consuming about 500% the amount of information as someone in 1990 was. We simply can't process that. No one can process that. And so we react by filtering arbitrarily, like everything comes at us and then it's arbitrary what hits us rather than, setting up filters so we limit the amount of information intentionally so that only the important stuff gets in.
So how do we set up those filters,
Yeah.
to become more productive?
Yeah, it starts with recognizing that there were always some really natural filters that technology has changed, but are in fact quite powerful when we realize them. And the biggest one being space as a filter. And what I mean by that is used to, you were limited by what you were around. And our brain has what's called cues. When we walk into a space, our brain is cued to say, this is what I'm supposed to do here based on what I've done in the past. And so it's how do we set up particular places that are for particular work. And
Okay.
so that's a filter because you walk in and you say, oh, when I'm here, I do this, I work. So at the place that I'm supposed to do my hardest work, I'm not going to check fantasy football. I'm not going to check Facebook. I'm going to get up and move. Like that's a filter people don't think about, but it's like if you can literally say there's certain places that I'm going to do only certain things, then we call that like sacred places in various forms. It actually becomes a filter for you. That would be
Yeah,
one.
just say, yeah. There's a very good reason why I cannot work out of my home. I've failed miserably at that. I don't do that, and that's why I rent space. People always say, "Oh, well, you're independent. You could work out of the house." I'm like, well, I could, but I can't. Yeah, I can't do that. I have to have a space where I go do work, just as you said.
Yeah, and space, I think it's interesting in the world that we live in. Often we just think of it as a cost center. And so we say, how do I, if you're in an employment, the question is, how do we reduce that footprint, right? How do we get as many people in as small of a space as possible? And so we're creating these spaces that there's a reason only 7% of people say they do their best work in an office, because their offices are a cesspool for interruption and distraction.
Yes. Yeah, speaking of that, I mean, just jumping right into this trend of open concept offices where we don't have any walls. And tell me a little bit about your opinions around this one, because I've got my own, but go ahead.
Open offices are really great places for everything except for working.
So yeah, I would agree.
It's very interesting because the reason that open offices have occurred, there's some good ones and some hidden cost ones. On the optimistic side, it was intended to remove the ant farm, cog in a machine, sit in a cubicle until you become powerful enough, then you get a corner office thing. So it says, hey, we're all a group, we're a community, right? So we're going to take down the walls. That's a really great thing, theoretically. But the real truth is it's much cheaper. That's the reason we do it. You can get more people in a space. Now, here's the problem with it. What we're actually seeing is that people communicate less in open offices because there's this feeling of being afraid of interruption. What's really challenging about that is that there's less collaboration that is occurring, but still more interruption. And the reason is simple, that attention is fundamentally driven by what other people pay attention to, and it's social. So whatever I give my attention to, I'm saying that thing is valuable. If I can see people I care about while I was going to do something else, my natural inclination is to say something to them. Or anytime I have a question, like, oh, well, they can help me. So we always are going to take the path of least resistance to getting the information that we think that we need. And in an open office, it's as simple as the more people that you can see, the more likely you are to not find better mechanisms that don't interrupt yourself or others to get that information.
The idea being, more collaborative and whatnot. But in reality, when, for example, my wife, she worked in an open office, everybody wore headphones.
That's right.
Everybody had noise canceling headphones. So how collaborative really is that?
It's not. If you're in an open office and you can't change it, really the key is, how do you make sure you provide spaces that the open office component is only for a certain type of work? There's certain types of work that, like, hey, I'm going to pound out email and I just want some background noise. That's no big deal. But when I need to really zoom in and knock out something that requires my full focus, I need to be in a place where I'm not interrupted, because when we get interrupted, there's a cost, there's a tax to that. The state of flow, which is the type of focus that we're seeking at work, it's the most enjoyable. It's the moment when time disappears and everything else disappears and our full attention is in a single space. Any interruption eliminates that. And then you have to have the entire re-uptake, like you have to come right back to it. And very seldom can you actually get there.
Yeah, it's a reboot. Yeah, that reboot time, I think you're pointing out that, that's a tremendous productivity killer right there.
That's right. I mentioned space is a great filter. I should say two other filters that are, when we think about what are our filters, the second one is tech is a filter. Tech can filter for us. And so, like, my encouragement to people all the time is, I'm not talking about a level of barrier that the stuff you want to do, you can't get to. We want to say, how do we instead eliminate the notifications that we don't even want to deal with, or the emails that come in? Look, I love JCrew, but I don't need an email at 4 p.m. about JCrew. Like, how do I create the mechanisms that allow those to be captured and put in a place that I can look at them when I actually want to, so I have control? So text one, and we can go there. But I'll say the last one is people are filters for us. This is the great opportunity. It's shocking to me how often I hear people say, well, I have an admin, but like, the admin in today's world, it can be one of the most powerful people that we have. And I should say, not just admin, but our spouse can filter for us. We go with social media because we go to people and they filter what information that we should share. And so it's just saying, how can I be intentional about saying, I'm not going to worry about that because I've trusted someone else to filter. If it's important, it will get to me. If we don't do that, then we're literally just choosing to allow whatever anything and anyone else says is important to dictate what we pay attention to.
Right. You basically ceded control at that point.
That's right.
You've given up. And going back to the technology filter that you mentioned here, so many of us just allow the default, whatever it may be in the technology that we use. And I mean, we can use Outlook, for example, that the default being the email coming up first, that is, your inbox is going to be the first thing that you look at. Where, I mean, I was absolutely blown away when somebody told me that, well, actually, no, your calendar could come up first if you really wanted it to.
Yeah.
Absolutely blew me away. I was like, really?
Not possible.
Right. People don't take a couple minutes and actually take a look at, well, what can I use this technology for and what can I do? Why let your inbox dictate your to-do list?
That's right. If there's one thing that we hear over and over again in our work, it's just the overwhelm of the inbox. Like, you're sending and receiving 204 emails a day. It's impossible. That no one could possibly expect to be able to handle that. And so what do? We react in ways that aren't necessarily helpful either, right? We either turn the equation to say, just how do I get off my plate? So someone sends me an email and my response is like, sure, what works? It's like,
right.
Let's make sure we have more coming at us. And then here's the even more hidden story. If you get to inbox 0, it turns out there's certain types of efficiency that actually don't actually create efficiency. They just create more volume. Having this need to always have my inbox empty or have the unreads done, the faster you email and the faster you send something out, the faster you get a reply. The more messages you send, the more you receive. Right. And so at some point, everyone will not have a system built on efficiency of email use that will not break their back. It will happen to everyone at some point. And that doesn't mean we don't ignore or like, I'm not saying just punt the whole thing together. What I am instead saying is, how do you create rhythms in the way that you're working with your inbox, that it actually is functioning as a tool to drive business forward, but it isn't just driving you to react to everything at the minute that you get it?
Yeah, I remember, several years ago, a friend of mine, he had a very regimented schedule as to he would only check email, he said 3 times a day, which I completely doubt that that's even possible. But, his analogy was, would you go to your mailbox every 15 minutes or something like that? And I thought, a little bit of a stretch, for an analogy there, pal. But
yeah, the inbox is also your phone. It's also the conversation you had at the office. I mean, it's certainly not just a mailbox, that's for sure.
Right. And I've had other friends, say that I don't check email until 1 hour into the workday. I try to work 1 hour ahead of time. Again, I'm not sure if this is realistic. I mean, have you had clients or worked with clients that were able to actually manage that inbox from a time standpoint or a blocking standpoint, I guess would be a better way to think about it?
Yeah. So you're just exposing exactly what ensures that everyone who makes any attempt at this spends a day doing it and then just feels defeated and guilty. And then what do? You go to the place that makes you feel better. So now you're on YouTube watching funny cat videos. So
right.
None of that's realistic. And here's why it's not realistic. Because we're curious. And we have a hard wiring. Like, if we think someone sent us something, we actually get the release of the neurotransmitter dopamine, which makes us happy, right? In the anticipation of receiving a message and sending a message. And so the idea that I'm going to say there's something out there that I need to be aware of, and I'm going to just shut it down because I have discipline is absurd. So here's a system that for me, and maybe this is the benefit of having ADD while studying and researching and working with groups on it, is that I think like, oh, that actually doesn't work for me. I start every day. I look at every place that I could have a message. I just start by doing it. I say, okay, what's out there? By doing that, I then go into pausing and prioritizing. I don't live in it. I actually write down on a separate place. I think that's a really important strategy for improving inbox management is you don't want to live in the inbox. So if I have messages I need to respond to, I use Evernote. I write the name down and I live in Evernote. So it's not, new thing. But like, I know that at a moment I have what is out there in front of me. And then I prioritize and I make decisions about what actually needs my attention at this moment. Then I dive into hard stuff, but it's not until after I've actually looked at all the stuff out there for 10, 15 minutes, because otherwise I'm worried that I'm missing something. It's really easy to say that we shouldn't worry about it, but it's not actual human biology to do that.
Right. There's that fear of missing out. Yeah, there could be the magic email that's coming in that's going to make my life so much better. And I agree with the dopamine hit. I mean, I think back if I'm out casting the net out there, for, I don't know, for a speaking gig or something like that. And you're just, okay, where's it coming? Where's it coming from?
Yeah. And I think the whole key is, what is the system that you have for having full visibility at a moment in time that then allows you to step in and do one thing from that extended, complete picture without actually worrying during that allotment of time that something else might be coming in. So a lot of what keeps people going to their inbox, checking to make sure the next thing is there is they never feel like they have full visibility on what they need to do, or they literally have no clarity on what they're supposed to be doing. And so they respond with reaction or a frantic, frenetic pace of like, oh no, what else is out there? So it's like, step back and say, what are all the places that I need to check to know that there's nothing that I actually need to put my attention on? And then once you can kind of account for those, then you can do a quick search of them and then not be bound to all of them all the time.
Right. One of the major distractions is, a lot of the different social media platforms, out there. And with them increasing with so many different places to check, I guess, how do you filter all of that? I mean, how do you choose? Am I going to be part of everything, or do I need to really make conscious decisions on, what I'm going to engage in, what platforms I'm going to look at and things like that?
Yeah, well, I've got to be honest. This is a internally debated discussion as well. At some point, we have to have a real assessment of whether these platforms are giving us what we want. And the truth is, the more time you spend on them, the less happy people are. People that spend more time on social media are more narcissistic, less emotionally intelligent. I mean, this is like clear data. You want to have a lower quality and less enjoyable dinner, have your devices out. And the reason is because we're social beings. And it's sad that we are going to social networks because we are social beings, but it's actually robbing us of the chance to have real deep connections. With that said, I'm not saying that we should all get off social media. What I am saying is that it might not be giving us what we think it is. I think if you start there, then it can give you the ability to just step back a little bit and make more strategic decisions. For me, I have some news places that I go once a day. Actually, it's delivered to my inbox that I know I don't need to worry about any news. It might happen because I'm going to get it once a day. So that eliminates my urge to check social media. From there, it's not really a risk. Like I go to social media for family stuff, and I have to do some of it for a social platform, but it's not alluring when you kind of figure out that it's not returning on its promise in some ways.
Right. Once you draw the curtain back, it's just not as shiny as it once was. No, I completely agree. And I think many of us struggle with, do we have to be on everything? And where's the line for us? And really, it's obviously a personal choice, but I think many of us become very conscious that this is a tremendous distraction, and it's really pulling away from those social interactions that we really do crave.
That's right.
We're just not as authentic when we are out there as well. Everybody's on vacation. Everybody's happy, and you get this very false sense of what the world really is.
Or really angry.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
Well, actually, I know that sales in the space that you're in, probably, when you think about distribution, like I think one of the most absurd things that has happened is this idea that you can use social media at a volume to somehow generate business. Like, insert template, send to 10,000 people or to everyone I know. Yeah. No one likes to feel like they're a number. And I literally know no one. I've not met a single person who's actually making a career out of like cold emailing template messages through a LinkedIn strategy. Like LinkedIn is very valuable for maintaining contact to people that you have some real connection to, or that's a mutual connection. But as like the volume game, that's just not how we're wired.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, I am bombarded by these folks who want to create these blast strategies and things like that. And I freely admit that I said yes one time,
of course,
and it was a disaster. I mean, I literally spent hours individually messaging people, apologizing for what they just received. I mean, it was just one of those things I just like, okay, I learned my lesson very, very quickly there.
And you know what? The good news is you're not alone.
Oh no, we all experiment with this. I think we're all subject to these messages saying that we have to be on this and we have to be a part of this world. And sometimes when we get involved with it, our better sense comes back and says, maybe I don't need to do this. This just doesn't feel right.
That's right.
How did we get here? I mean, how did we get to this point where we do have this fear of missing out?
Yeah. I think the hidden story is that machines or technology is the enemy. Is it the answers? I see both. I see organizations that are like, the problem with email is that we need better technology. So we're going to add Slack and have another channel that people can use. And not to say Slack doesn't have benefits, but the real hidden story here is that somewhere along the way, we've bought into this idea that we don't have the limitations that machines don't have, and that we're the perfect performer. The expectation is that we should really emulate machines. Technology is expanding. It can do more in the same amount of time today than it could yesterday, like exponential growth. But the thing is, humans, we're not. We're limited. We can't be everywhere. We can't know everything. Your job now is have you watched that video? You should have. Have you read that book? You should have. You listened to the podcast.
Right.
If it's not this one, then you should have. Then I come home, have you read this parenting book? You should have. You watched this Netflix? I mean, it's infinite, which is the greatest way for us to rob ourselves of any possibility of being excellent at anything. And that has never been the case before. It's never been the case that you had to actively choose to just not be good at a lot that people said you needed to be good at in order to have any chance of happiness and focus and growth and performance. So I think it's we just have to realize technology is different than us and give ourselves a chance to just be very limited, but excellent as a function of that.
I think it's one of those things. I feel like there's an opportunity there for, age being wisdom there, and the longer you have been on this planet, you have an opportunity to recognize that you do have a choice here, that there is conscious choice in here. And maybe as, if we going to the more the brain science, of the
executive function.
Yeah, executive function, right? You look at this and you can't make that decision today. As people get a little older, yes, they can start making those decisions.
If there's one thing that does deeply concern me, I think technology is actually doing what on the positive side is doing a little bit of what the junk food movement did, where there was this period where it's junk food, you can get it, let's do it. But now people, it turns out, want health, right? We don't want to die of obesity and every disease. We'd like to eat healthy occasionally, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I think the same is happening. I think we're seeing technology realize the problems and change, but we have this other narrative that is occurring among kids in high school and middle school. And it's teachers that are schools that are thinking that they have to integrate technology because they're going to live in technology. It's there's no need. They need the skills lost from technology. They don't need technology. Doesn't take any learning. My 2-year-old figured this thing out, right?
Right.
And then they say our kids are addicted to their phones, but I mean, I can't take it away from them. That's their whole social outlet. I'm so you're belligerently refusing to take a device for fear of social isolation that is the single greatest device in history for the creation of social isolation among kids. So
right.
There has to be a change in the boundaries. I mean, we don't give kids cigarettes and cocaine. We shouldn't be giving them technology when they can't control it.
Right. And I think, again, from a parent standpoint, there's a tremendous amount of pressure to do that.
Yeah.
Total rabbit hole. But I look at these kids, and in my oldest, he's in middle school now, and all of a sudden he's handed a brand new iPad.
Yep.
And this is how we're going to do our work. And talk about trying to give an ADHD kid a piece of technology like that and say, oh, by the way, but don't play games, don't do anything else on this, but do your schoolwork. I mean, really? What are they missing here?
They're missing the fact that it's cheaper than buying real books. I mean, there's incentives to do that.
On the surface, you say, wow, that's really great. They all get these devices. And then you step back and go, uh-oh, this isn't that good. This is not as good as we thought it might be.
That's right.
Curt, anything else that you might you want to share with the audience? Any advice, that they could go try right now just to kind of help them drive a little more focus into their life?
Yeah. First thing is take 3 minutes and turn off all your notifications on your phone. This is not hard. Go to your settings. You can do it and just straight down the list and simply ask the question, do I want this app to interrupt me? On a deeper level, I would just ask the question, do you feel like you have control over what gets your attention and what you focus on? Because if you're not active and intentional in these categories, you can rest assured that in a world where the economy is driven by your attention, that there's a slew of other sources that are happy to make those decisions for you. And the only challenge there is that what you pay attention to, you become. And so it's so critical that we step back and ask the question, how can I put the things in place that will support me focusing on what it is that I actually care about?
Got it. Before I let you go, tell the readers how they can get a hold of you and, tell them about your book and all of that kind of fun stuff.
Yeah, the book is called Can I Have Your Attention? And Amazon's an easy place to get it. And in fact, the Audible and audio version's coming out very soon. It might be out in the next couple of weeks. So that's exciting.
Oh, excellent.
If you're an audio listener, like most of us are, to get in touch with us, our company's FocusWise. We work on particularly organizational levels and leaders asking how do they cultivate cultures of focus. And so feel free to go to focuswise.com or email me. And my email is cs@focuswise.com. And I have really great filters so it doesn't overwhelm.
Okay,
but it's
great.
also really easy to directly reach me.
Well, and we'll definitely put links in the show notes on how to get a hold of you. Well, Curt, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time. Always great to see you here. And hey, be well, my friend.
Thanks for having me on, Jason. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.